Welcome back to another episode of
Save it for the pod.
with Alex and Lindsey.
That was kind of weird.
Why?
Welcome back. It's like
That's kind of your line.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got ahead of myself.
No, I think it's good.
Welcome back to no, I'm just kidding.
Welcome back to another episode of
Save it for the pod
with Alex
and Lindsey.
and a brand new book.
What's the book this week, Alex?
The book this week is Red Rising by Pierce Brown. And how did we come across this book?
It is another recommendation from a coworker. My boss told me about this book.
Oh, so it was kind of like required reading, otherwise you're getting fired.
I hope not, but I read it, so we'll never know.
A friend of mine from college posted about this book like several months ago. So it's been on my radar. And then on our road trip, it was suggested by one of the people in our back seat.
It does feel like it's on a lot of people's radar recently. And I think that's interesting because it first came out in 2014.
Which is a solid 12 years ago.
Yeah. So it's not a new release at all.
Not at all. Although I don't know if I knew about it in 2014. Granted, 2014 was about the time I started Wheel of Time and then didn't read anything else for several years as I worked through that series.
Because that series is 13 books long, so
right.
It just took you that long.
Yeah, but here we are.
Let's get into it.
Spoiler warning, we are going to spoil this book and we are going to spoil all of it. Do you want to say anything else about how we're spoiling this thing?
No, I think that about covers it.
Yeah, so going into a quick summary, we have this character. Oh gosh, what if I say it differently than you? Darrow or Darrow?
I pronounced it Darrow in my head.
Okay, I think I may have flip-flopped consistently.
Which do you prefer?
I think I prefer Darrow, honestly.
There is a double R, not a single R.
Have you ever heard of the name Darren?
That has a single R.
No, it does.
Yes.
No way. Are you serious?
D-A-R-E-N.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you could spell Darren any way you wanted.
No, that's how you spell it.
Okay.
Read it and weep.
Darren, D-A-R-R-E-N.
No.
I'm also seeing D-A-R-R-Y-N. Is Darren ever spelt with
Come on,
one
Google.
R?
Come on, Google.
Oh, gosh.
I'm going to have to fact check you.
I'm quoting Glitter and Gloom 41 from Reddit. I've never seen it with just one R. I don't like it. Feels weird and wrong to me.
When I look up the name Darren with one R, it comes up.
Really?
Yes. It's the given name of Irish and Gaelic origin, meaning oak tree or great. It's also spelled with two R's, apparently.
Okay.
Apparently.
Compromise. Finally. Somewhere I don't end up on the wrong side of the naming battle. But yeah, so Darrow is the main...
Can we say Darrow since you also thought of it that way and that is my only way that I thought of it? Please.
Yes, we can say... Now, you want me to say...
Darrow.
Darrow.
Thank you.
Darrow. I need to rhyme it with borrow. Yeah, we can say Darrow. This is a society in the future after we've begun as a civilization to colonize other planets. We start out on the moon, and then as we get to the moon, we go to other planets throughout the solar system. And Darrow ends up on Mars, and him and his family have been there for hundreds of years at this point. And they are working to terraform the planet and gather helium. That's like the oil of the space colony civilization. It's a necessity in order to do all this terraforming and to power all this galactic travel. And he is part of this society that separates people based off color, not of skin, but of hair, perhaps. I don't really know. I don't know if they really even get into it.
I don't know if it was that they separated based on your features like hair color, eye color, and whatnot at the beginning, or if it was that they separated groups out, and then through the genetic pool being limited, it got those traits. But I wasn't sure. Maybe it started out that way.
I really don't know either. And in some ways, it all seems a little bit artificial as we try to describe the reasoning behind it. But you've got all these colors, and he's of the red group of people. They mine, searching for this helium-3. And he in particular is one of the best rising, oh, wow, that is 2 on the nose. One of the best rising young miner people. They're called Helldivers. And extremely dexterous, extremely quick thinking, because it's a very dangerous job. And he seems to be one of the best one of those guys. And
he's like 16 years old.
Super young. He's married. They get married pretty young because the lifespan isn't very young. They talk like 30 is old and 40 is ancient. And he really wants to win this thing called the Laurel, which is like additional food rations for his particular tribe. And he believes he's won, and they do the Laurel presentation, and it ends up the same people who always get it. They realize it's just a carrot dangled on a stick in front of them. And his wife, her name is spelt with just E and O. And so me, an incredible name pronunciator, calls that EO.
I read it as that as well.
Okay. EO has discovered this brand new, like, secret tunnel to where there is grass, something he's never seen before. And so she takes Darrow out there, and they get caught, and she and him are both whipped. But when she is whipped, she begins to sing a song that symbolizes rebellion, and she is executed. And when he is caught burying this body, he is then hung as well. But his death is a false death, and then he is taken, and he is going to be used as a plant to infiltrate the top society, the Golds. They transform his body with all this science and make him cream of the crop. He is now as powerful as a Gold, and they've done all sorts of drugs so that he can become very, very smart and well-read, and he's very strong now. But one thing remains, because he was a Helldiver, he has excellent dexterity and strength in his hands. And he has, the work ethic of someone who has really, in some ways, slaved away his whole life with the expectation that that is what he needs to do to keep his family alive. So he enters this Gold Hunger Games, if you will, except it's to get into an academy. And to get into this academy, he's competing with the best and brightest Golds in the world, in the galactic world, I suppose. And then they're placed into this setting where they're sorted into separate houses, each house being one of the Roman gods on Olympus. So there's 12 of them. And he is in Mars. They simulate what it takes for a civilization, for humanity, to move across throughout time. So it starts out very tribal, and as you move through, leadership emerges. And then, much like our own human history, he leads a kind of rebellion against the typical power structures of the time. And I'm thinking specifically during the Roman time, where it was survival of the fittest in a way. And he introduced the concept of survival of the weak through unity and suffering, and that there is power in there. And then in doing so, he unites several different tribes to fight not against each other, but the system itself. And he goes and kills some of the proctors on Olympus where they are waiting. And then at the end, he rises even further in civilization as he becomes an honorary son of the very man who killed his wife.
The Arch-Governor Nero Augustus.
Was that his name?
Yeah.
Crazy.
I want to know what you thought Darrow's flaw was at the beginning.
This was super hard for me to find. At first, I thought the flaw that seemed very present was just similar to the book Emma, where it was like the ignorance of youth. But the thing with Darrow is he keeps getting proved right. So it's almost like he may be naive in his youth, but at the same time, he's also not beat down by the world enough to just be so pessimistic. So it was kind of hard for me to like continue that line throughout the entire book, because everyone is constantly telling him he's too naive and that this isn't going to work, blah, blah, blah. And he just ends up making it work. As I was trying to look at what his actual flaw was, I was forced to think that maybe his flaw was trusting that the system was always right. And that seems to be the thing that he has to overcome. So at the beginning, he's fighting against his fellow low reds to win the laurel, and he kind of views them as his enemy. But what he learns throughout the book is that it's not the people he's set up against that are his actual enemy. It is the people who are doing the setting up that is the actual enemy. So I don't know if I ever felt like he learned something from like a personal growth standpoint, but he did seem to become more aware of who his enemy was. So I suppose that is what he learned at a personal growth, which is the people who are put into the same situation as you aren't your enemy, even if you're competing with them. It's the people who structure the system itself. And I think knowing that, or finding that as what he began to learn, made me predict the taking on of Olympus while I was reading. So I fully assumed that this wasn't going to be a battle won against the students. I was pretty convinced midway through the book that he was going to take down Olympus. What about you? What did you think the biggest lesson was?
Well, we got to know what his wife wanted him to learn at the very beginning. And I actually wanted to talk about that because he was very content with his life, with, being the best Helldiver, with his wife, their just life that they had carved out for themselves, even though it was a hard life. And she was essentially like, you need to dream bigger. Like, that's not enough. And then she chose to sing the forbidden song, the death song, as she was being whipped. She kind of chose to make herself a martyr so that it would force, hopefully, I think she was trying to force Darrow to live for more than what he was content to live with. And I wasn't sure if I felt like his mentality at the beginning was a flaw,
right,
like his wife felt like it was. She must have clearly just felt like he had a lot of potential and giftedness that could potentially like be something to help their people out of the situation that they're in. And she was clearly a kind of a dreamer. But I don't think it's wrong to be content with your life, your career, and your family, like your little world. So I don't actually know if I felt like that was a flaw of his, even though the wife seemed to feel like it was.
Yeah.
I did agree with you on noting that he definitely has a bit of arrogance going on. So my take on that, I thought that would be part of what he learned by the end, but you're right. He just kept being proved right. He just kept succeeding. He did have moments where he knew he made the wrong choice and learned things, of course. But by the end, it almost felt like to me, he literally was making himself a messiah myth in his own mind, but for other people to kind of rally around. And I felt like it's possible that the arc of us watching his flaw of his just being very youthful, naive, and arrogant, but also really talented, I wonder if we've not seen that full arc yet, because this is a series.
Right.
And so I'm wondering if the arc of the entire series could be around that, because I do think that him coming out of this with sort of a, I am the hope of my people, like, great, like, your people do need someone who will be a champion for them, right? But you're also like 16 years old, and I could see this not going well, or like that you might crash and burn, or that, I don't know. I think it's a common thing for people of that age, for young people, to want their life to have some great purpose that they're trying to like live it up to or something. And I almost think it's a bit of a lesson as you get a little bit of experience and maturity to become content with your life.
And he almost seemed content before.
Yeah, it's almost an interesting like reversal. So I'll be curious to see, and I could be totally off base, and that's not the direction that the author's going to take with this character, but it's an arc that I'm wondering if we just really haven't seen actually play out fully yet.
Right. Yeah. There's a couple of things in there that I think are worth talking about. I see everything I'm getting from this arc. I would be surprised for Pierce to walk it back and say, and this is a bad thing, because he seems to be saying it's like this hope in the face of tyranny is a good thing. And so, and I respect that message. And I think almost to walk it back to this is the naivety of youth is in opposition to this hope in the face of tyranny. So I almost don't know if it will be walked back. I think he'll learn other things, but I think one thing about the way that the book was set up is you had the initial start before this inciting incident that causes him to change everything. It is a microcosm of the full book where he stands in opposition to those he's competing against, and he looks at them as the enemy, and then the system itself is flawed. But there's the thought, that's just because they're low reds. And then when he moves to high gold and to trying to figure out who the best golds are, the thought is, well, they're golds. There's going to be a different sense of respect here than there was when he was red. But he comes to find out that anywhere there is power, there is an insane amount of corruption.
Right. That anywhere where they're like, it's merit-based, the fittest are who rise to the top, that's not actually true. And it's about who your daddy is and who your connections are. And
yes,
all of those things, like your money. And
that is an interesting dialogue that Pierce is having with his reader. Because like, I think everyone kind of grows up thinking, oh, this is going to be merit-based. Or at least like that's how I grew up thinking. I was like, everything's going to be based on merit. We want the best people doing the most important things because that's what's going to drive our society forward. But I think the more people are in power, like, you know, averages of skill and intelligence and whatever it is are in some ways class agnostic. And so even the Reds have extremely talented people who can go very, very far given the same opportunities as the Golds, where even the Golds have these people who are below average. And the problem with the Golds is they kill them all. And that's how they raise their quote unquote average. And I guess in some ways the Reds accidentally do the same thing because the people who are foolish enough are often killed in their mining experience. And so like there's a cruelty in this particular civilization because they have rejected the concept that all men are created equal. And they've set up this caste system to determine what value is. And then they work very hard to maintain that caste system. And suddenly merit doesn't matter because when you're working on maintaining a status quo that is innately in opposition to human biology, you have to make that human biology artificial. And we see them doing that with the way they create golds. For example, they created Darrow to be this super powerful thing, but I'm personally of the opinion that I think they're doing that to all golds.
You think so?
I do.
Even like Cassius, who was just born into this elite gold family.
Look, when you put me in a book world where you tell me I have to reject all the things I know, you can tell me that these are all golds. You can tell me that this is all natural. I'm not going to believe you one bit.
I am inclined to believe that some golds, especially like from really well-off families, powerful families, that they may just, have good genes and they really are pretty elite, and then they're given the best schooling and all the best opportunities and the best diet and all the things.
Yeah.
But Julian, Cassius's younger brother, was also in that family, and that family certainly would have had the resources to make Julian more of a specimen than what he was.
He was a specimen, though. His issue was his personality was still kind, and that was the weakness of his gold. Because Cassius says that Julian was better at that particular martial arts than he was.
Right, but as in terms of just his body and
I think if
demeanor.
he's better at the martial arts, the issue is mental, not physical.
I do agree with what you're saying, that if we know that Darrow is not actually a gold but was carved to look like he's a gold, and we know that, spoiler, Titus, another character, another gold in this Hunger Games atmosphere, we come to find is a red, likely, that is masquerading as a gold. So we know that there's two, and where there are two, there's gotta be more.
There's gotta be more.
So I agree with you there of who knows how many.
And when it comes to instating a fascist regime, you have to support the myth that there is a superior group of people. And it's always a myth. And so that's why I feel how are they supporting this myth? They're artificially supporting it. That's why I'm of the opinion that to be gold is it's just a power thing. And we see several golds who aren't that talented. And it's just a matter of keeping up with the Joneses. And in this case, the Neros. Well, I guess it would be more Cassius's family.
And the Bolognas.
Yeah, I think there's probably gene editing. But again, gene editing probably only gets you so far, because I think they're really trying to push that these aren't humans, these are gods. But I think the important thing that would teach us, if the golds are all kind of a facade, is that there's no difference. They're all just humans. Even if the golds want to reject their humanity and say that they're better than all the other tiers, they're all simply humans. And humans are so capable of being so many different things that to say just because you were born in this class, you can only be this thing, I think is an extreme disservice to humanity, because then it's not merit-based and we're really selling ourselves short.
One thing that I thought might be Darrow's journey in this book was, I wondered if, since we knew he was inclined at the beginning to be really content if he has a girl he loves and that's kind of his family, I wondered if whenever there were the mentions of the girl on the horse that laughed at him, and then the same girl he sees in the locker room, and then they blush at each other, she's humming the death song, I was oh, is he gonna meet somebody, meet a gold, fall in love, and then it's gonna take him away from his mission? Because we know that that's something he was content with before. Is this gonna take him off course? And that didn't end up happening yet. I immediately was pretty confident that that girl was someone he would become interested in. But I think I was wrong, at least so far, that his interest in the girl who is Mustang, we come to find, would steer him off course of his purpose of being there and the idea that he's going to lead the rebellion and free all the Reds from their slavery. I feel like he only grew in his commitment to that goal through the end of this book, at least. But he also did end up liking Mustang a lot.
That is probably an important piece of his character growth, which is a dedication to a cause outside of his own contentment, and where he has expanded his own family to not just his particular tribe, but all the disenfranchised, all the people who are being oppressed, even the Golds who are in some way. I'm super suspicious of the EO and Mustang situation because I have some theories about who EO is and even the thing that she whispered to her sister before she was hung. So I was curious what your thoughts are that EO said, and if you've got any thoughts about who she is.
I was curious what she said, but I really didn't have any predictions. So I want to hear yours.
I thought two things. The first thing I immediately thought was, oh, she's pregnant. And if she was, then she knew that Darrow would do everything to protect the family and then really give up on the cause that she wants, which is why she would tell her sister that and not him, because she needed him to not burn out. But as the story goes on and I'm told to reject any notion of truth, I'm like, is she even dead? Have the Golds been grooming Darrow to be this messiah figure for years, a decade plus?
Why would the Golds be doing that?
Because the Golds are trying to overthrow the status quo.
The Golds try to maintain the status quo.
I think anyone who's a Gold who's not in power is probably trying to get in power. And so if that means pulling people from Red to be something bigger, I don't think it's just Reds doing that. I think you need Gold connections to do that.
Interesting.
All that to say, I wouldn't be surprised if EO was meant to groom Darrow to be more than he is, because she seemed so much more awake to the oppression that was around them. And I can't tell if that's just because it was possible to be aware of that oppression as a low Red, or if there's outside influence.
She definitely told her sister something that we still, even after the book was over, did not get to learn. So I do think that will be important, and I don't know when it's going to resurface.
The reality is I kind of thought that EO and Mustang might even be the same person. I don't know how. I don't know if it's possible, but it doesn't seem outside of the realm of possibility in my mind.
Whoa. I hadn't thought of that. Guess we'll have to read and find out.
Tell me you disagree without telling me you disagree.
I just don't know how that would be true, but it would kind of blow my mind if it was.
Do you have any favorite characters?
Well, it's funny you asked. Speaking of Mustang, I don't know if this is just because Mustang was like the coolest girl in this book, and so I liked her the best, but I think Mustang was probably my favorite. I appreciated that she was a Gold who seemed to share a vision with Darrow, who is originally a Red. It was Mustang who chose not to enslave Darrow. She's the one who chose not to enslave someone and kind of started that chain reaction that Darrow then really popularized.
Right.
But it originated with her. And as we come to find out, which is kind of a plot twist at the end, which I didn't guess, she is the daughter of the arch-governor Nero Augustus, who sentenced EO to death. And she's the twin sister of the Jackal, who is Darrow's rival in the arena. I didn't guess that, but I really appreciated, and Darrow says it at one point, that she is the best of the Golds, that she is the best of humanity, because the Golds are the best of humanity, but also the worst of humanity. And she's one of the best of them. Mm. So I think that if his revolution is going to work, sure, he can have the billion reds behind him, obviously, because they're the ones he's trying to truly bring out of slavery. But all the other colors need freed too, and so do the golds. And that's something that I think Darrow learns in this book. I'll just read one quote that kind of encapsulates that. This is after he has to go through the passage, which means he was put in a room with Julian and only one of them was allowed to walk out alive. It says, Julian's blood is red, not golden. I thought the society only played games with its slaves. Wrong. Even the family, Bellona, as powerful as they are, could not protect their less capable son. And that is the point. So that's just one quote. There's so many quotes that could support this idea that he learns, which is that the society, the structure of it all, it hurts the golds too. It hurts all the colors. It's not good for anybody. The society tries to shape golds to be, like you were saying, detached from their own humanity, to be heartless, to just rule with an iron fist. That's the messaging that they try to indoctrinate gold children with. But it clearly doesn't work on everybody because you have the daughter of the arch-governor who just operates differently than that and thinks differently than that. So I think she's a boss for that. I like her a lot. I think that whenever at the end, when Darrow thinks that she's gone to betray him, when he sends her and half his army to go capture the jackal, and then he finds out while she's already on her way there that she is the twin sister of the jackal, he's like, oh my gosh, I've played right into their hand. She's going to betray me. I did not think she was going to betray him, so I guessed that correctly. She comes back, delivers the jackal into Darrow's hand, and she's just kind of harshly grinning at him, like, you thought I was going to betray me, you. What the heck? But, she's understanding because she didn't tell him who she was. But I just thought it was funny. She's just like, you didn't trust me? Did you predict that she was the twin sister of the jackal, or did you predict that she wouldn't end up betraying Darrow?
I didn't predict that she was the twin sister of the jackal, but I was on board when Darrow was putting together that they knew each other. I was like, yeah, they definitely know each other. But I always thought that she wanted to warn him. And I think from a literary perspective, it's important that she doesn't, to show that even in the quote unquote worst families, there's potential for good, But also, when you look at her twin brother, who is so unpresent to his body that he's willing to cut off his own hand to survive and win this game. I'm like, well, first off, it doesn't seem like that much of a sacrifice because they could probably just reattach it. So not a big deal, because everyone's getting all these scars, but I'm assuming no one has the scars afterwards because they can just medically fix all that.
Maybe.
You don't see all these gold proctors walking around without those things. So I presume he seems just so out of touch and so desperate to have power that he's willing to sacrifice so much. And that's just so unhealthy. But it's not so different to what Darrow does.
Darrow would have chopped his hand off in that situation too.
And he was also willing to kill Reds to get to where he was. Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting because they're named the Reaper and the Jackal, and they're willing to sacrifice a lot for their cause. Because I say all that as a negative on the Jackal, but then you have to say, but it really is probably good for Reaper, for Darrow.
Is it the cause that justifies an action?
I'm sure everyone wants to say it's the ends that justify the means, but I don't know.
I wanted to talk about what means are justified when serving towards a good cause, because there was some similarity. Sure, we've like referenced how, oh, there was like a Hunger Games aspect to this book. The most recent Hunger Games book, Haymitch's story, that we also did a podcast on, where we see more into Plutarch in the early years. Plutarch is someone we talked about who he's undercover for decades, getting up into the upper ranks in the capital so that he could actually do something when the time was ripe to do it, when there was an alternative in place, an army in place, the hearts of the people were turned towards the right cause. Like when everything was right, he was able to make impact because of his covert mission for all of those years. And I feel like we're getting to have a book where the main character is that character.
Sure.
Where they're doing all of these things where they would prefer to not to have to be doing them. They don't want to kill people, but we see Darrow is willing to do it. I think that is just an interesting experience to get to see from the main character of someone like that. And then it's also funny because Darrow and Haymitch share a similarity as well, which is that they were in love with a girl who was very rebellious
and a little bit musical
and a dreamer. They almost would never have like in and of themselves had that goal, but then the girl's death is what causes them to have this mission. So I thought those were two just really interesting ties with the Haymitch book.
There's a lot of people trying to play this Plutarch role. Obviously Darrow is, but Titus was too.
Theoretically, yeah, it seems that way.
Like you said earlier, if there's two, there's probably more. I keep getting hints when people are like, oh, we're not like the Golds like this. I would be curious what percentage of people in the Gold government are rebelling and just trying to maintain this power so that they can safely rebel. They meet their win condition, if you will, for rebellion. And then they're actually fighting against themselves. Because like Nero makes the comment at the end that he's not so concerned about the bloodline. And I'm like, oh, interesting. Because you know who else wouldn't be concerned? Any red turned gold. And is there really much of a difference if Nero is a red turned gold in him killing Io as there is with Darrow killing Titus?
Right. There wouldn't be. So it's an interesting thought. It's like, could that be where this is headed?
And, you know, Reaper, Darrow, he is compared to two people, Titus and the Jackal. Both of them desperate for their cause, and they don't treat the lives of Gold as worth the cause they're standing for.
Like they're willing to die to win.
They're willing.
And it's like, why?
Yes.
Because a normal Gold knows this is just
Cassius,
a game.
Devastated. I am of the opinion that who knows how many fake Golds there are.
We did get a quick little piece of information nearer to the beginning where I think Darrow asks, how many other people have you sent into the academy or to the institute like this? To the sons of Ares, who like are the ones who have him carved and get him planted into the academy. And I think it was like 90 something and they'd all failed. So allegedly none of theirs had made it in yet, but that doesn't mean other people aren't.
Right.
Very possible.
Yeah, and for a while, I thought Sevro was as well. And he was probably my favorite character.
Really?
AKA Goblin.
I wanted to talk about him. That's cool that he was your favorite character. He may have been my second favorite.
I really enjoyed Severo. Him and Titus were both on my potential red theory because they both have a disdain for Golds. And I get it because they wanted Severo to die because, you know, you've got Severo's dad, who's the proctor, and he kind of has like a BT role in a sense.
Like from the Haymitch Hunger Games book.
Exactly. And so his son was supposed to be killed in these games, but didn't, and then really did very well. And I thought his whole wolf pack thing was a lot of fun.
Kind of like insane and a little bit weird, but yeah.
Yeah.
Also like, okay, go off.
And I thought the importance of him solving so many of Darrow's problems was cool because in a world where power is the most important thing, you know what's even better than power? Teamwork, trust, loyalty, friendship.
He really was serving as like the hand to the king.
Yeah. And just incredibly fascinating individual who's rejected by the Golds and yet better than all of them.
I don't remember there being a scene that justified his loyalty, but it just felt like a complete devotion, no questions asked.
I think it has to do with him liking the other sports team or whatever, Yorkton, and talked about how he likes the story of the underdog. And who is the underdog? It's Sevro. He was the 100th draft pick or whatever, and he takes down the top one in the passage. No one likes Sevro, and no one likes Sevro's dad for some reason. They're avant-garde. They're not your typical power image, but they choose to not be in some ways. And there's no shame there. And so like, because Sevro doesn't have aspirations to win because he knows he's not going to be allowed to because the system is already rigged against him, he's like, well, I want to stay alive and I'll throw my cause with someone who I think has a chance at winning. And I think testing the kids to see if they can unite a tribe when everyone wants to win for their own sake, such a thought-provoking exercise, because you can't win if everyone wants power. You can't unite if everyone wants power. And there are a couple people who want power, but they can't say their cause. Like Titus wants power because he wants to free the Reds. Darrow wants power because he wants to free the Reds. And because they can't say their cause, what do you know? They're not going to get together. But that would have been a great alliance. And then Cassius wants power because he's also trying to take down the arch-governor. Everyone's against the arch-governor, you know? And so what does Darrow do at the end? He joins the arch-governor. But because Darrow's cause is the one that prevails and he roots for the underdog roots for him. And so even at the beginning, we're seeing seeds of what is eventually Darrow's victory plan, which is empower the least of these, and bada bing, bada boom, you've got an army.
One thing I caught with Sevro and Darrow is there's one point in the book where Darrow makes the observation about Sevro that, quote, his eyes do not judge, not even now. There are times when I wonder what I did to earn such loyalty. And then at the end, before Darrow kills the proctor Apollo, they're in battle and he accidentally slips up and says the Red's curse word rather than the gold version of it. But then he kills Apollo, so it's fine. Like, no one finds out, right? But then whenever he has Sevro looking at all the clips and creating the exact narrative of the footage that they want to send out to the drafters who are watching, Sevro is the one looking at that footage, and there's a moment where he, at the end, is like, hey, like, the voices were kind of muffled at the end of your fight with Apollo, so I just deleted it. But Darrow's like, oh no, what did he hear? And he has the thought that in his eye, I see a subtle difference when he looks at me. Now, like at that point. And so that sounded really similar to when he was like seeing complete trust and loyalty in Sevro's eyes. And then it's like something has changed in Sevro's eyes by the end. And so that made me like, oh no, is Sevro going to turn against him or betray him? Because he certainly heard the slip up. And so probably has some suspicions about who Darrow is now. It just felt too
on the
nose. Like, It makes me concerned for their friendship going forward.
I think that's a great catch. The one thing that happens is the jackal disguises himself as a boy named Lucian and attempts to surrender kind of in a Trojan horse method to take over Darrow's army. Did you know that that was a bad guy, that was Jackal?
I did not know that was the Jackal. I didn't guess that.
One thing that kind of tipped me off was when the scout was named Lilith. You've heard the story of Adam and Eve, and Adam in Jewish mythology actually has like a second wife that's named Lilith. There's a lot of like demonic origin in that. And so when someone was named Lilith, I was like, okay, that's probably an allusion to an evil woman. And then you had someone named Lucian, which is just 2 or 3 letters away from being Lucifer. And so at that point in time, I was like, okay, if there's a theme here, I shouldn't trust this guy named Lucian. But this guy seems weaker than all these other people. And then I was like, but he's got to be evil, because there's probably some naming terminology going on here. And Pierce is like giving the informed extra knowledge. And so at this point in time, I'm like, who is this? Is this the Jackal? Is it someone bad? I really wasn't sure if it was the Jackal, but I knew it was going to be someone bad. And then when Darrow starts doing all these suspicious things, not really telling anyone because he needs to fool this guy, I'm like, okay, that's what's probably happening. I thought that was an interesting use of mythology. And really, they've been using Roman mythology the entire time. And the amount of Judeo-Christian imagery that Pierce pulled in for Darrow's ascendance to being something beyond just man, but almost a god, was very on the nose.
Yes, I caught a lot of that too. And we've even read a more like historical book looking at how society went from the perspectives and culture of the Roman Empire kind of trailing along until today, where you had like might makes right and, you know, survival of the fittest.
Cheater be cheated.
Cheater be cheated. All these sort of gold mentalities.
And that book is Dominion by Dr. Tom Holland.
Yes. Red Rising opens with the Arch-Governor giving a speech to all of the initiates to the academy. And he's literally just like, all men are not created equal. The weak have deceived you. They would say the meek should inherit the earth, that the strong should nurture the gentle. This is the noble lie of democracy. In Dominion, it was like these mentalities were just a given in the Roman Empire. And the ideas that the Christ figure comes in and teaches things like you should care for the poor and the meek shall inherit the earth and the last will be first and the first will be last, things like that, that over time that gradually shaped society. And then today
gave birth to democracy.
Yeah, definitely reading that book, I think, made reading Red Rising really interesting because you could just see a lot of that inspiring Red Rising almost.
Right.
A lot of that history. And there was a lot of references with Darrow. He frees the slaves to try to combat violence begetting violence, to try to give justice while also earning loyalty, respect, and admiration instead of causing people to hate him for issuing out justice. There's a scene where he orders someone to be whipped for trying to rape a fellow person in their army, but then he also takes the lashes as well afterward, and he's like, listen, any punishment I dole out, I will also be taking. So just know that if you're going to do something, I'm going to get hurt too. We're all in this together. His willingness to suffer alongside of other people, his willingness to suffer is not something that the Golds understand. It is confounding to them, and they're afraid of it. It sort of was a reshaping of all of the cultural wiring that they had up until that point for him to do that. That feels similar to the Jesus message coming in and being willing to suffer, but that suffering is victory rather than defeat.
Right.
And the Roman Empire, the people don't understand that.
Yeah.
It's like, what? That's not victory. And so it's just sort of this paradigm shift.
When you look at Dominion, where like that was the new way that power in society was shaped, was those who suffered now had power. In this world where they're simulating all of human history within like a year or whatever, like it's almost no surprise that that message of power in the weak and power in the suffering, and that you can have a new identity by joining this cause, even after you've been cut off from society in whatever way. I was expecting something like that because of
The way our human history shaped itself, like you would imagine it would come up again potentially in that kind of environment.
exactly. And so in a way, it's kind of mind-blowing that this society is built on this world that says, no, but that was like a temporary setback. When from my perspective, the power of humanity is shown, the power of society is shown when you see the way people care for the less fortunate. There's some archaeologists, and I don't know if this is just something I've seen on the internet or if it's a legitimate thing, but they say something to the effect of like, when did you know that societies existed in human history? It's when you saw people like fossils of humans with broken legs that had been repaired, because that shows that there was a society that cared for those who were weak, who had been hurt. It's mind-blowing to me that people would buy into this belief that caring for the weak is bad, because it is innately biological, where like if we didn't care for the truly weakest, the babies who were just born, humanity would die out. If we didn't care for the elderly, then we would lose so much knowledge so quickly.
It is interesting you use the word biological, because I do think that there are species that, you know, the runts do die. Like they will be purposefully removed from the rest of the
Herd.
The babies, not the babies, but
in a world where we have access and power and the only people we're competing against are ourselves, it's silly.
perhaps that explains why humans do this.
Yes. Because it's the same thing that Darrow struggled with at the beginning. He was only fighting for his family. And I think it is likely that all these people who are in power, they're only fighting for their family. They're not fighting for humanity as a whole, because when you fight for humanity as a whole, suddenly the weak are an asset. And that's what Darrow learned, because the weak are part of humanity as a whole. And that's the power of democracy, is we get the opportunity to shape a society that benefits all of us.
And if they're all inspired to work together, you can do a lot. If you're forcing people, you can't do as much. But if you've got people who are really behind the cause and care, you're going to have a better workforce, a better society, all of the above. So he learns that lesson in the games for sure.
He does.
There's another moment in the games whenever he goes back to House Mars. He had been away. He'd been compiling his army of freed slaves, and he sneaks back into his original house castle in the dead of night, and he goes in and he carves the sign of the Reaper, the weapon he uses, and his nickname into like all their doors and different surfaces on their war planning table, and then he leaves. And that reminded me of David and Saul in the Jewish religious texts, the moment where Saul is sleeping in a cave, that David was already further back in that cave or something.
Saul was the king, and then David was supposed to be his successor, but Saul didn't want his reign to end, so he was hunting David.
And David has the opportunity to kill Saul and end it right then and there. And instead, he just cuts off a sliver of his robe and then like confronts him later. He's like, hello, look, I didn't kill you when I had the chance. Like, stop chasing after me, please. And so it's this idea of showing your dominance without actually killing anybody.
A balance of power and mercy all in one.
Yes. Which is what he was learning, is that this is where true power lies.
Is in restraint.
Yeah.
And maybe that is the lesson, that power comes in restraint, because he didn't have much restraint at the beginning.
Another thing that was interesting, but this almost drew from the Jewish texts, but then reversed it. Whenever the games have basically been won and he is looking at a map and all the castles, all the regions are starting to have his Reaper symbol on them to show like he's conquered them all. And as he's looking at it, he thinks their symbol, there being the Reds, their symbol, a symbol of our rebellion, a working tool made into a weapon of war. So he's reflecting on the Reaper as a working tool by all the billion red slaves, a working tool made into a weapon of war. And that reminded me of the idea in the Jewish religious texts of this idea of like prophetic hope of weapons of war being beaten down into plowshares, and plowshares are like working tools to work the earth, right? So it's the opposite. And so I thought that was a really interesting choice, and I'm curious to see, that gives me some ideas about what the trajectory of this series will be. Because we do have this like messianic main character, and yet it's also not the same as the story that we know, like from our society's history, where instead of the weapons of war being beaten down into plowshares and the sort of like, Jesus didn't lead a violent overthrow of the Roman Empire, right? But this is a story where it's almost like maybe it is going to be a violent overthrow. We will see.
We will see.
But I just thought that was interesting how it draws heavily from, but then starts to turn it on its head. And I'm curious what the themes that will emerge from that are going to continue to be over the next 2 books in the series.
One thing that related to that Darrow learns, that if you overthrow something through violence, chances are you're going to be overthrown with violence. So that is an interesting point that you're making, where like his whole thing is turning the working man into an act of rebellion against the leading government. So I will be curious if that is a lesson he learns.
I did appreciate that after Darrow has one of his bigger Messiah type moments where he takes the beating as well, the lashes, and then the whole army's just like stunned and just like, whoa, like, oh my gosh. I appreciated, this is another reason I like Mustang, is she of course had to tease him about it. So whenever I read it, you know, it was a cool scene, but then I was also like, okay, like we're having a Messiah moment. I see. Okay. And so I liked that she also was like, the book almost poked fun at itself in that moment on the next page through Mustang, where she was like, what was that about blood brothers? That means absolutely nothing. You might as well have said you were pinecone cousins. And then he's eventually like, but did it work? And she was like, sure, Messiah, you made yourself a cult. Because these men in their Messiah moments, am I right? Okay.
Yeah, but granted, out of that cult, we got some great character development from Pax, who was one of my favorite characters, and I'm still devastated by his death.
Oh, yes.
Pax was just incredibly strong, and then he's also very funny, and everyone wants to hear about him and this obsidian woman named Helga. And I think I even want to hear him talk about Helga, because he just seems like an incredibly funny guy. And every time he goes into battle, he just shouts his own name.
I am Pax. What's his last name? I forgot.
I don't even know if he says,
I'm trying to find
I
it.
am. He's just straight like, Pax, Pax, Pax. Like, just in case.
But know his full name, though.
It's like Pax Augustus or something like that.
Pax Ptolemaeus, Pax Ptolemaeus. And he's like beating his chest. And just a warrior.
He's also just got like a genuine heart, you come to find out, and he is incredibly loyal after this.
And they kill him off. So it was sad that Pax died.
It was.
Should we talk about cry count?
I think it's about time for cry count.
It's about that time. Alex, what was your cry count?
0.
No tears shed for old Pax Atelemanos?
No. You can always tell when a character is going to die when you start liking them more. And so I was worried for him and Sevro. But out of the two, I really needed Sevro to stay alive. So if one of them had to go, I'm glad it was Pax. What was your cry count?
My cry count was also 0. No tears shed.
So no cry count, but what would you rate it? Thumbs up or thumbs down?
I would rate this book, I'll give it a thumbs up. I liked it and I am interested. I want to keep reading the next books in the series. I think if I were to have one of our books we've podcasted so far that would be the closest to a thumbs down, it might be this one. This wasn't a perfect book. I felt like the pacing did pick up a little ways in, but at the beginning, I wasn't super into it right off the bat. There were a decent amount of times that I felt like things were being told, not shown, or not like fully justified, but we'll see. And I maybe am just very different than this main character. So there were times where I felt like it didn't make sense that Darrow would essentially be like, I don't know what to do. Like all these bad things, all these bad circumstances, and I don't really know what to do. And then usually it was partly because of Sevro, honestly. But suddenly then like everything would just work out and there would be this grand plan and it would work and he would end up on top. And so I was just like, what is this like back and forth between I have no idea what I'm doing, I don't know what to do, and then everything just works out. And so I don't know if that made sense to me, but you may have a different experience.
I think a lot of times in leadership happens because there's a void. And a lot of times I don't think it's that anyone was more suited to solve the problem. It's just that someone was willing to just say, we're just going to do this thing. And he kind of mentions that, Darrow does. He says he's not the strongest, otherwise it would have been Titus, or maybe it was Pax or whatever it was, and he's not the smartest, otherwise it would have been Mustang, or he's not the prettiest, otherwise it would have been Cassius. Maybe he doesn't say that, but you get the idea. But people follow him because he's willing to go.
He says, you follow me because I know where we're going and you do not yet know.
Yeah. And so like he doesn't know what to do, but he knows where to go. And so that is his challenge, is figuring out how do we get from point A to point B. And he's willing to make those decisions, even if they're bad ones. And he does make mistakes. I think it's more a sign of all of them had the opportunity because no one was technically more suited. It's just he grasped it because he was more driven to take ownership. And I think that's just part of what makes a leader a leader.
So you felt like his character made a lot of sense to you and like you could relate more to it maybe than I did?
Yeah, I think a lot of times people who are leading don't know what to do. And part of what you do as a leader is make use of the skills of the people who you are leading, who are at your command. And so you don't know and you give objective and they do. You don't have to necessarily give them the plan if they're good at what they do. The worse they are at what they do, the more of a plan you have to give them. So I think, yeah, he recognized that Sevro, or in some cases Cassius, or in some cases Mustang and Pax, were a good tool for the job. And then he delegated that job. I think that shows the importance of why it's not just survival of the fittest, because you need an enormous amount of skills to make a society work. And you need to take advantage of all those skills for the good of everyone. We see when he treats those that he commands as tools, he loses them over time. And I think that's an important thing because he had intimate conversation with Sevro about who they killed in the passage. And so like there was always a sense of I see you as human to human, where he lost that with a lot of people and eventually they betrayed him. But the people he had that human to human connection with, if they did betray him, they felt very, very bad about it. So that's one thing that he did better his second time around after his quote unquote resurrection, was like he connected with people on a personal level.
Are you talking about after Cassius stabbed him and then Mustang helped him stay alive?
Yeah, because Cassius told everyone he was dead.
Right. So I had some qualms while I was reading, I would say. However, I overall enjoyed the book, want to keep reading. And some of it might just be that maybe I'm not the person this book was primarily written for.
Right.
So what about you?
Yeah, Emma's probably still my lowest rated, and this is probably above it. So I would still give it a thumbs up. I want to know what happens next. But I didn't feel as moved by the character growth in this one. It felt more of like a philosophical conversation than it did like, oh, I'm rooting for this character and I'm so grateful for where they ended up. So definitely a different type of book than some of the ones we've read recently.
I kind of hinted at this when we were talking about Eo's vision for Darrow. And while I do think the author is saying it's good to like be the figurehead of a rebellion that helps your people get out of slavery, great. Like, sure. As somebody who in my teenage years was like, my life needs to count. My life needs to be for this bigger purpose. My life needs to like not be my own. It's hard for me that that's the message for him, because for me, it was growth and important to make the stakes not be so high. Maybe when you're in slavery, the stakes are that high. So you don't have the privilege to just relax and be content with your life and not make everything such a huge thing. I think it's because of my background that I'm struggling, but I also recognize the circumstances aren't the same.
Yeah, and I think what's important for enacting change, we hearken back to Dominion that talks about how Christianity created a lot of these values in our modern culture, but it's not like they didn't exist before. They just weren't popular and powerful. And so sometimes we have to understand that it's okay if our lives are just little ripples that can impact a little bit. And over human history, if we get a lot of those little ripples, eventually it might have a tidal wave of change, kind of like what Christianity did with valuing the weak and the oppressed and the poor. And so I think when you look at that mentality as someone who from a very young age wants to make their life count, it does. It does. And what we want people to leave this book saying is like, hey, your life doesn't count.
I'm always very suspicious of anyone telling teenagers that they need to give up their lives for a cause. And I think that Darrow is a teenager who was thrust into the situation where he's supposed to give his life for a cause. And it's what his wife wanted for him. I don't necessarily want that for him. I think maybe he is just so talented and he has the abilities that like he can really change the world for all of these fellow Reds who are enslaved, and that's good. But I'm just so sensitive to a 16-year-old having the weight of you need to change the world and you need to give your all for a cause on their shoulders.
And you would probably almost look at the adults in the room that are forcing that almost as villains.
I would have a tendency to.
And
yes.
This supports my theory that Eo is a gold plant grooming this talented individual to become this Messiah figure to upset the status quo. Because what we did learn in this book was the golds aren't the ones doing the research. It's all the other colors that are looking for the things that will make things work. So it wouldn't surprise me if with all their technology, they were like, okay, this particular person, very, very promising. So we can potentially use them, groom them to become something that we could use. And when you look at Titus, someone who had someone he loved raped in front of him or something like that, there's a certain amount of similarity to their backstories that I'm like, is this intentional? Because that would set up these adults that are manipulating these young, low-class Reds to be their pawns in a much bigger game.
And it could even be rather than the Golds doing it, because again, I don't see the Golds wanting the societal upheaval that would come from a revolutionary. Like, they try to maintain the status quo. However, the Reds, like the Sons of Ares, who are trying to cause that upheaval and revolution, they could be the ones doing this, kind of setting the circumstances up to have their champions to turn into Golds to try to hopefully infiltrate the system. So you could be onto something where it's like there are people in some level of power setting up the circumstances to extract these very talented low Reds for their purposes.
And perhaps it's just high Reds infiltrating low Reds.
Who's to say? I don't know, but I think that is a little bit why I feel uncertain about, but I know this is also a YA book and it's a coming of age in some ways. He's 16 years old. I also know in this society he was working and already married. It's not the same as whenever maybe 16-year-olds in our society necessarily today.
You say it's not the same, but in some ways it could be also worse.
Just as a final thought, I did look ahead at what the titles of the next books are, which is maybe cheating, but they're all out and they're old. And so I was able to see. And the next book is called Golden Sun, which I think we kind of see where that gets its title already, as he has become the kind of stand-in son of the arch golden governor. So we shall see, but that one makes sense. And then the third book is called Morning Star.
Ooh.
I know, another kind of Judeo-Christian allusion there with Morning Star.
That's associated with both the Christian Messiah and Lucifer.
Yes, it is. So I like that the title kind of has both of those existing in it.
Yeah.
Because it's like, this could go either way.
Oh, are you going to sing the song?
The death song that gets you executed for singing it?
Yeah.
I don't know it. I hope that they make a movie so that we can hear what this song sounds like. I found one on YouTube and someone commented saying that Pierce Brown tweeted that this is one of his favorite renditions.
Well, I suppose that's a wrap.
Until the next book. My son, remember the chains when gold ruled with iron reins. We roared and twisted and screamed for ours a veil of better dreams.
My son, my son.
Pride is not the word I'm searching for.